1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. Perfect number. Now, the other folks, as you know, that are not coming in because of the weather, or they live in the country, 3 of them do. So I said they could watch the podcast afterwards, so we'll survive, right? Well, this is week 6. We're going to be going over white balance tonight, and we were going to do an in-class critique, but I want to make sure everybody's here, so we'll do that next week, and we're going to do the in-class critique for your photos you shot last week, and you're using the EV balance, EV setting on your camera. We'll go over that next Tuesday together. So everybody get the pin in? Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to go over what's due this week is a white balance take home, and then we're going to do together an in-class lab after we go over our, got a couple PDF files we're going to look at and a video we're going to look at together. But if you look at the assignment number 6, white balance take home, that's the first one we're going to go over together. So let's go over that together. The assignment 6, white balance take home. You're going to, this week, we're going to learn about white balance tonight, but I want to kind of go over the take home real quick, what you'll be doing. You'll be setting your ISO on your cameras to either an auto setting or ISO 100. If you have a lower ISO setting than 100, some of yours might have an ISO of 80, you can use that. Set the max picture size on your camera to max, or and your cameras will all have a setting on that. Max value might be max resolution. You'll have to look at your manual, some of yours, but it's basically the highest resolution image you can take is what you want to set it to. Best quality JPEG setting also. Those are generally the same setting. Max and highest quality JPEG setting, but I just want to put it in both just in case it's separate on yours. You're going to use the auto white balance, and you're going to shoot 4 pictures each of the below light settings. You're going to shoot a picture in direct sunlight, in the shade, under tungsten, and under fluorescent. Now, tungsten are the old-fashioned bulbs. You might not have those around. It's the old screw-in type that doesn't have the twirly governmental imposed light bulbs that we have to have now. The old flash bulbs, you remember what I'm talking about? The old incandescent bulbs. If you have one of those, that's great. If you don't, you won't do that one, okay? Most of your houses won't have those anymore, by the way, because I think they've wiped them off the shelf. I think you can still buy them, though. But if you don't have that, don't worry about it. And then basically, so this is auto white balance. So in auto white balance, you're going to find an area that's in direct sunlight. So midday, tungsten would be old style lighting, in the shade, and fluorescent. Then you're going to set the white balance to sunlight. Now your cameras might have sunny, it might be sunshine, bright, whatever. It might be different than sunshine or sunny. All right. Then you're going to shoot the same pictures in white balance in the same set. Is going to change it to sunlight in a sunlight setting, a shade setting, a tungsten light setting, and a fluorescent setting. Make sense so far? So first setting is auto white balance on your camera, and it's going to be in these 4 areas: in a sunlight area, shade area, tungsten, and fluorescent. They're going to switch your white balance to sunlight and do it in all 4 areas as well. Then step 5, you're going to use a correct white balance for each of the photo settings and shoot them again. And so basically you're going to do 4 different settings, or if you don't have tungsten, it'll be 3 different settings: sunlight, shade, and fluorescent. And while you're in those settings, you're basically going to do the auto, sunlight, and then whatever the correct one is. So let's look at the first setting, sunlight setting, the sunlight setting column. The sunlight setting column, you'll do auto, sunlight, and then the correct setting will be sunlight. Okay? Shade, you'll do auto, sunlight, correct setting, be shade. I'll skip tungsten gold fluorescent because most of you have those at home and at work. Auto, sunlight, and fluorescent will be the correct setting on that. Naming convention, and anytime I do these naming conventions, because you guys upload your pictures anyway, it's for your own benefit to name these correctly. And we talked a little bit about backing up last week, I believe, and archiving. And so it's going to help you and benefit you to just have some naming convention for your pictures. And again, this is for you to name your pictures, Auto 1, Auto 2, Auto 3, Auto 4. When you do upload these though to Flickr, it does keep the name as a title by default. And so that's helpful for me to recognize what it is that you've just uploaded. The challenge is, and you're going to learn how to do this tonight, you're going to begin learning how to manually set your white balance. We're going to watch a little video here in a second of how to do it. In the video though, just a kind of a precursor to the video, it does tell you to use a gray card, which you can buy for like $5 at any camera store. I'm going to have you use a piece of white paper, and that's it. Okay? Because that's all I've used over the years. Even though a gray card does work, you don't really need it. And we'll learn about what a gray card is here in a second. So an optional challenge would be to set the manual white balance for all of the above settings. So in your sunlight setting, shade setting, and fluorescent setting, set the manual balance. And remember, you're going to use a white sheet of paper. I have some up here if you want to take one up here, or you can use any white paper you have at home in a printer. But you do pay a lab fee, so you might as well use our paper because it's your paper. You pay for it, which most students don't use the lab enough, I don't think, during the semester, because you guys pay, what, $50? I think it's $50 a lab fee, I think. So yeah, you might as well use it. And so you'll upload all of these pictures to your photo site, your picture site, in a week 6 set. And so that's the take home. I will come back to this before we leave tonight to make sure there's any questions, because you'll probably have some after you go over the discussion on white balance and how to do manual white balance. While we're going over the discussion though, I think most of you, because we've already done a lab on this, know where your white balance is, the auto settings. But you might not know where the manual, how to set the manual white balance. You might be looking for that while I'm going over the video and the handout. So let's go ahead. I'm going to switch here to week 6. And now we're going to go into the folder for the in-class, which I've got a number of documents we're going to look at. And by the way, I've been enjoying your audio threads. Thank you for posting your audio threads. Been very insightful, and you guys have some good points, so really good. This is just a real short video we're going to watch here in a second. We'll make sure, I think the sound should be working. But after we watch this video, there's a couple documents at the bottom of this video that we're going to go over. One is white balance 1.pdf. I have it up on mine already on my Mac. And then this document here we're going to go over as well. And then this little bit at the bottom we'll go over, which is basically a something for you to do tonight. Actually, I want to make sure everybody's going to practice just a little bit on setting your camera to do a manual white balance within this room to see how it works with a white sheet of paper and all that good stuff. And so you'll be able to practice a little bit before you leave tonight. Now in this section as well, I have you take, I think, 3 to 5 pictures just for practice between now and next week. I do have you in this one create a separate set on your photo site called Week 6 in Class instead of submitting them in here. Because some of your pictures, because I remember I have you change your setting to the largest quality. Some of your cameras, if you put them all together and try to upload them together in a zip file, Eagle wouldn't take it. It could be too large. And so when you upload it, even if it's a 10 meg file a piece, Flickr will resize that for Flickr to fit. And so I'll have you do that. Just go ahead and put in your upload a Week 6 in class. This is the first time I've had you upload a Week 6 an in class lab. I'll have you do that because remember last semester when I did this, there was about half the class that when they did a larger quality JPEG, I think the average size was about 7 to 8 megs, 10 megs, some of yours, I'm guessing, around that range. If you have a 10 to 12 to 15 megapixel camera, it runs about that on high quality. So you can just upload them and it'll be fine. Okay, let me go ahead and go to this video real quick, and we'll, let me turn off. Would you do me a favor in the back there? Would you turn off that light, the lights in the very back? Just, yeah, it's all the way in the back wall there on the left side. Thank you. You know, one of the things here I want to make sure this isn't going to be choppy or nothing because I'm remoting into this. We'll find out real quick. If it is, I'll switch over. So make sure it's not too choppy.
Hello, welcome once again to Photography in 90 Seconds.
Yeah, it's off a little bit, but that's
Today's
okay.
topic is custom white balance. Now, as we move from room to room, and under different lighting conditions, our eyes adapt naturally and set the white balance appropriately. But for a digital camera, the process is a little bit different. Now, most digital cameras have an automatic white balance setting, and this does a pretty good job, but unfortunately, it's only approximate. Now, if you're serious about getting proper colors, proper skin tones, and having a proper color workflow, you're going to want to set the white balance manually. Now, fortunately, this is a fairly easy process. What you're going to need is a spectrally neutral gray card, like the following. Now, if you're shooting in RAW, the process is very simple. All you need to do is take a picture of this card with your model under the right lighting conditions, and in post-processing, you can just select a portion of this to set the white balance, and then sync that across all of the images. Now, if you're shooting in JPEG or video, it's quite crucial that you set the white balance in camera. Now, to do that, each camera system will be slightly different, but it'll likely involve taking a picture of a gray card like this, and then under the menu system, once you've filled the frame with this card, in the menu system, select the image of this card as your reference point, and then click OK or agree to set the custom white balance to that image. Now, the second step will likely be changing the white balance from automatic down to the custom setting, and the icon typically looks like this. I just want to reiterate, if you're serious about a good color workflow, it's very crucial that you set the white balance manually and not rely upon the approximate white balance that's achieved by the automatic white balance setting of your camera. All right, till next time.
Okay, so a couple things he mentioned. Would you get that light back there for me again? Thank you. On the white balance, auto white balance, and setting it to manual, is the card. You might not have caught it. When you take a picture of the card, it stores it in your camera. It stores a picture of that card in your camera, or in this case, it's going to be a piece of white paper. That piece of white paper, then, from that point on, it's not like you have to keep it each time, take a picture of it each time. You can actually keep the picture of that. It'll keep the picture of that last time you took the picture of that white paper as a source for the white balance. Because the deal with white balance is, in order to have true color, you have to know true white. And so sometimes your eyes are deceiving, they fill things in, even lights make things look different than they really are color-wise. And so the whole purpose of having a card, a white card, or a gray card it's called technically, is to give true white to that sensor so it determines what true white is, okay? Now in your auto settings, all your white balance is doing is basically faking out your sensor and overriding it to make it look like whatever. So if it's, for instance, if it's dark in here like it is, kind of this would be more like a shady or a fluorescent white balance, what it's doing there is actually faking out the sensor to say, okay, it's dark in here. They've set it now to shady or fluorescent. We're now going to make up for the color or the lightness, the whiteness that's not in this room. Because even, for instance, in this room here, white walls, we have white walls in here, but if you look in the corner of the room over there, it's a little dark. You know, you can actually see some black on the white walls because it is so dark in the very corner. And so what white will do by doing a manual white balance, it will actually balance out the sensor to say, okay, here's my point of reference sensor for white. Everything else in this picture, you're using this as a point of reference for what true white is, okay? and then that's going to be able to determine truer colors in your pictures by doing a manual white balance. So I'm going to switch to the document here, this read white balance 1. We'll look at that one first. It should look like this, I believe. So, white balance is an aspect of photography that many digital camera owners don't really understand or use. You guys have probably seen it on your cameras before, but you've never used it before. And it's something well worth learning about, as it can have a real impact on the shots that you take. So, for those of you who have been avoiding white balance, we're going to look at it this week. So basically, simply, white balance is the reason we adjust. The reason we adjust white balance is to get the colors that you are taking a picture of, the colors that your images around your setting, as accurate as possible. Now, why do you need to get the color right in your shots? You might notice when looking at shots after you took them, the color looks a little off. It looks a little tinted maybe. It might be orangish or bluish or yellowish look to them, despite the fact that when you looked at them with your naked eye, it looked fine, it looked normal. The reason for this is that images have different sources of light, color. Remember we talked about the first couple weeks of Kelvin temperature of color of lights. Fluorescent has a bluish cast to photos, where tungsten, the old-fashioned bulbs, incandescent bulbs add a yellowish tint to photos. And so it ranges from very cool light of blue sky through the very warm of a candle. And so you'll notice here in this image here, it's kind of hard to see it, but basically you've got a really different colorization of this Johnson baby powder here. It's quite different from picture to picture and ranging from the color source that's around it, the light source that's around it. Now we don't generally notice it in temperature because our eyes adjust automatically when you walk in a room. So this room's a little darker. As soon as you walked in here, it adjusts. Or when I came in here, I turned the lights down. For a moment, it seemed a little dark, but then immediately your eyes adjust. Okay? If you walk into a pitch dark room, within seconds, or milliseconds actually, your eyes adjust where you can see where you're going. So, unless the temperature of the light is very extreme, a white sheet of paper will generally look white to us. However, a digital camera is not that clever. We've talked about this already. It's kind of stupid as far as our eyes are very smart. The sensor only does what we tell it to do. It's not clever enough to make these adjustments automatically, and sometimes we'll need to tell it how to treat different light. So, for cooler green light, like blue or green, you tell the camera to warm things up, and a warm light, you would tell it to cool things down. In film cameras, what we did is we just had two choices. We had daylight and tungsten, and that was it, because that's all we had back then. We didn't have fluorescent except in car lights, and car lights, and that was about it. Commercial retail stores, I think, had fluorescents when I grew up, but all your houses, schools, workplaces used old-fashioned bulbs, the old tungsten. And so, of course, using one film in both situations would be impossible. So, adjusting white balance. What we have to do here is different digital cameras. All of your cameras in here are different about how this works. But if your camera does have the manual white balance, in your manual it will give you specifics. Generally what it is you'll take in your manual white balance, you'll basically take a piece of white paper like he showed you in the video, and what I generally do is just fold it over twice, and you can keep this in your camera bag. Let me give you guys some. Just fold it over once, then fold it over again to where it's just a nice little square. And when you set your camera to the manual white balance, it has you point at a white reference, is what it will generally tell you in the manual white balance. When you press the button halfway down, it focuses in on it like a normal shot would take. And then when you press it all the way down, it takes a picture of that white paper and stores it as a source for your manual white balance. Okay? Again, all cameras are a little different, but that's how it works. So we're going to do that in just a second as an example. So let's go over some settings that your camera might have already in white balance. Yours might be a little different in name, but you will generally have all of these. Most of your cameras will, from lower end to upper end cameras. Auto, this one you've used up to this point for the most part. It's where your camera makes the best guess on a shot-by-shot basis. You'll find it works in most situations, and it generally works in most situations that have good lighting already. Like, for instance, does this room have good lighting? How about when you wake up tomorrow morning, say it's no clouds in the sky and the sun's coming up, is that good lighting? No clouds in the sky. That's good lighting, right? So same with sunset, that's good lighting. And so in most situations like that, it works great. But let's say that you are midday and it's very sunny out, direct sunlight, not going to work so great with auto white balance. Let's say you're in a dark room like this, auto white balance isn't going to work so great. So it's in the settings that are kind of tricky where auto white balance doesn't work so well. And when we generally need to take a picture, when I mean we, all of us, like right now, we have to take one. It's an anniversary, somebody's leaving, we're not going to see for a while. It's generally always in the tricky spots of light when those things happen, in my experience. Not that it's all the time, but generally. And so it's nice to be able to already have this manual white balance already set in your camera. You've already done it once. You have a snapshot in your camera memory of that white paper, and then you can just change it over to that and take your picture. So auto white balance, though, is all we've got thus far that we've been playing with. Tungsten's the next one. This is made, usually symbolize a little light bulb, shooting indoors, especially on a tungsten, or incandescent, the old-fashioned bulbs. Generally, this cools colors down, and it usually adds a blue tint to photos by default. So if you were to take a picture in auto white balance in a tungsten setting, it would generally have a blue tint to the photo. Old Polaroids, if you look at, if you have old Polaroids that you have in your family, which most people do somewhere, somebody's got them. They were a lot of times taken indoors around Christmas time, you know, when people were indoors because of winter. A lot of times you'll see those pictures have this kind of bluish tint to them at times, which looks kind of cool. And it looks like, like, oh, that must be some type of effect. And that was just the color the pictures came out in indoors. Fluorescence, the other one, to compensate for coolness, give like a slightly green tint in fluorescent. You need to warm up the shots, and there's two options on most of your cameras. They have normal and halogen, but there's others you guys might have too, like LEDs, another one that you guys might have now, because a lot of your vehicles and even a lot of your houses now have LED lights all over the place. And so this one would definitely be a fluorescent setting if you had a fluorescent one. Normal or halogen, again, your camera might have more settings than that. And fluorescent by default is going to give a greener tint. Then daylight sunny, not all of your cameras will have this setting because it sets things fairly normal, white balance settings. It warms up the shot and adds a yellow orangish tint, to make up for the bright sunny light. Cloudy, this setting generally warms things up a touch more than daylight. Flash, when you use flash on your camera, there is a flash white balance on most of your cameras that can be quite cool to cool it off. So if you use like a flash WB mode, you'll find it warms up your shots a little bit and it's not so cool from the light. And then the shade, the light and shade is generally cooler, a bluer shade or a bluer shade of light than shooting in direct sunlight. So this needs to be warmed up a little bit. And so those are some of the settings you would have, and whatever setting you're in up to this point, you just change your white balance to that and you took a picture. There's also one in here that's not in here, or one up there, there's one that's not up there, like fireworks is another one a lot of your cameras will have now. fireworks white balance. So you literally take it at nighttime, during 4th of July, during nighttime events, and you generally need a tripod for that because you can't, it'll actually tell you in the fireworks mode for white balance to please put it on a tripod because of the shaking that could occur from your hand holding it. So it has to be very steady on that one. So let's go to the manual white balance. In most cases, you get pretty accurate results using the above preset, but we said there's the exceptions, and that's what we're learning this week. So some digital cameras, like most of your DSLRs and higher end point and shoots like you guys have, allow for a manual white balance. Now, granted, if yours does not, you don't have to do manual white balance this week because it's not in a required assignment. So if your camera doesn't do this, no big deal. But at least you'll know how it works when you get a camera that does. And then also, even if you don't have a manual white balance, I'm guessing you haven't used every one of your white balance modes and seen what it does. And that's a good idea to do that this week too. That's one reason I have you guys change the white balance settings. So in manual white balance, the way it's used varies a little bit between model to model, and how you tell your camera what white really looks like in a shot. So it has something as a point of reference for deciding how the colors should look. You can do this by buying yourself a white card, or a gray, it's called a gray card, was specifically designed for the task, or you can find some other object like the one I just handed out to you, fold it up. And so let's look at the following shots, and we're going to see some examples of some books. We're taking an auto white balance mode. The light in the room, it says here, is from 3 standard light bulbs. I'm guessing the old-fashioned incandescent. And as a result, the image is quite warm and yellow. And you can actually see, it almost looks like, anybody grow up with smokers in your family? Anybody grow up with smokers in your family? Okay, my mom and dad both smoked, and whenever you would walk into a living room, wherever, we had kind of, we had bookshelves in the living room, bookshelves in the dining room, and as a kid, when you had smokers in the house, like my parents were smokers, so you would literally begin to see stains on the walls, smoke, and when I see this picture, it reminds me of that, even though it's books. But anyway, this is what it looks like when it's in a standard light bulb, auto white balance. You'll notice it gives it that kind of yellowish tint, and they actually have a setting on the iPhone for this. In most of your cameras, like where you do like manipulation of your camera, you can have like, kind of remember the name of it, what they call it. It's not a Polaroid or something like it's something like that. It's kind of like a Polaroid effect, kind of the old school effect on pictures, to where basically it adds this type of yellowing to the picture, kind of filter. And so that's automatic. So let's look at the next one. So after taking this picture, he held up a piece of white paper in front of the books, took a picture with that after the manual white balance was set. Look at this one. Much truer color now on the books. Much truer color. You still have your darkness on the bottom right corner there a little bit, but you can tell a big difference on the colors. I mean, you can literally see the screen of yellow over this, whereas this one, no screen of yellow showing up over it. All by just setting the manual white balance. And it's not difficult to do the first time you do it tonight. If you've not done it before, it is not difficult to do. It's fairly easy to find on menu on most of your cameras. You don't generally have to find the manual to find it. But let's look at some creative uses for white balance, because there are some creative things you can do in white balance that maybe there's times you don't want accurate color in your pictures during photography. You might say, for instance, you might want to have a warm-up filter during sunsets. The results can be really spectacular. Fairly warm tones in photos, even warmer. Now you can go out and buy fancy color filters for your digital cameras. You don't need to do that. But I do want to focus on some of the picture shots here. This shot was taken in auto white balance. The camera took a guess at what the colors were, and it took a pretty good shot at it, okay, on auto white balance. This one here, exact same setting, except the auto white balance was now changed, and they added a color difference, which really in this one would be adding like a shade filter, a shade white balance filter, changing it to shade or indoors, and it would add this effect to it. The last shot here said it warmed it up even more. This would be adding like a sunset type of setting, sunset type of white balance, or a dusk type of white balance onto your shot. And so basically you can take pictures manually. If it's a sunset picture, you might want to add shade to it. If it's a shade picture, you might want to add sunset to it, just to see what you can do artistically. So the ability to control white balance from one to the other is much greater in digital than film. That's one area where all photographers that have switched, like myself, from film to digital, big advantage white balance, because we didn't have that. We didn't have such a creature. With film, you could shoot negatives, and then some machine or lab technician would do color corrections in the lab, in the actual darkroom, and it would cost tons of money to do this. And if you're using slide film at that time, you could do the same thing, but you'd have to wait till the next loaded film to apply that same effect, which would take a long time, and sometimes they wouldn't match. And then it's not hard to find advice online for understanding various different white balance on digital cameras, videos like we watched tonight, tons of examples. But here's an example of a person on a beach that is fairly white-skinned, like myself, and by changing the white balance, making them look tan, okay, by changing the white balance. And so basically, on this one right here, to get the wrong effect on a perfectly sunny day, just take and change it to cloudy on the white balance, or shade on the white balance, to give it the tan effect, which your significant other might like. And so by faking out and adjusting it, you can have a lot of fun with it. Also, it talks about icy scenes like today. When photographing icy scenes, perhaps you should try to set your white balance to something warmer like daylight or shade. And what it's going to do is it's going to add an even bluer effect to that image. So we'll add more blue to the actual image here. Down here at the bottom, you can actually see blue show up in the image. When you add the daylight or shade to it, it'll actually add more of a bluer tint to make it look colder than it really is, and then just simply boring white. Okay? So let's get your cameras out, because the next thing I want to do once I go to the next PDF is I want to practice. But before I do, I want to show you some of the examples of this would be let me refresh this real quick to give what it would normally look like. Okay, so that would be a normal picture, kind of bright, maybe midday. So it's called a bloodroot flower, was photographed against a fallen birch tree using a variety of different white balance settings. The effects the settings have on the colors on the image range from subtle to dramatic. So let's look and see here what happens. Let's start here at the bottom with shade, daylight, fluorescent, flash, whitewash to that, auto white balance, tungsten, a little bluer effect there, and cloudy. And so each one of these gives a little bit different effect on it according to the setting that you're taking. So let's go get your camera out. I want you to go ahead and set it to the manual white balance. I'm going to turn the light on. And what you're going to do is, I'd like you to kind of get up and walk around, and I'm going to turn the light on. And I want you to kind of come over these printers in the corner of the room. It's dark, but what I want you to do is bring your cameras up, use your white piece of paper, and set your camera using your manual white balance with that white piece of paper. Then take a picture of those. Let's take a picture of those printers before you do this with auto white balance. Then I want you to take a picture of those printers after you do this, after you set the balance manually.